There have been some comments made in the past week about Doctor Who and the current state of the show, which have kind of blown up and been taken out of context and spiralled into something much bigger than I'm sure they were originally meant to be. Comments made by a former writer of Doctor Who, of the show, and then a response made by a current executive producer. They've been reported on various websites and various articles have been run. Fans have been responding to the response as well and having their own say. So I just thought this would be an interesting one to talk about, looking at the comments in their original context and whether any of this actually changes what we know about the show's future. So this whole saga began with an article in the latest issue of Doctor Who magazine, published about a fortnight ago now, I guess, which basically was an interview with the writer Robert Shearman, who wrote Dalek for the first series of the revival for Series 1 with Christopher Eccleston, the first Dalek story of New Who. Before that, he'd written various pieces for Big Finish, and that's kind of where this all comes from, because Rob has done novelisations of two of those stories he wrote for the 8th Doctor and the 6th Doctor on audio about 20 years ago, a Jubilee, which Dalek was based on, and The Chimes of Midnight, an acclaimed Big Finish audio play. And reading this interview, I was kind of taken aback because it starts off with Rob being asked about how he came to do these novelisations of these 20-year-old audio dramas, and as part of that he talked about his own relationship with the show, its current status, and he basically made a comment along the lines of, Doctor Who is currently as dead as we've ever known it. And that wasn't the full comment, it wasn't the full quotes. What he was actually talking about was the way in which there is not currently an incumbent Doctor in the way there has been for every year of Doctor Who's history so far, whether it's been off-screen or on. So obviously in the show's original run and the past 20 years, there's always been a current Doctor, the First Doctor, the 9th Doctor, the 15th Doctor, whoever it might be at that time. And even in the Wilderness years, or the first Wilderness years from 1989 to 2005, and with the TV movie in between, there was either Sylvester McCoy kind of still loosely as the 7th Doctor to begin with, and then Paul McGann was the current Doctor in a manner of speaking, before the show returned in 2005. I think that part of his comment is quite an interesting take, and I do agree with it to a certain extent. There is not currently a current Doctor. They've not confirmed, what Billie Piper is, who she is, whether she's the Doctor or not, and because of that, as Rob says, we can't really, go off and do 16th Doctor or Billie Piper Doctor or whatever fan fiction. We can't kind of go off and write our own adventures with this Doctor because we know nothing about her or her personality or anything, her costume, or even whether she is the Doctor in the first place. I think saying the show is as dead as we've ever known it is kind of another thing, and again, these comments were sort of taken out of context a bit, and I think it was a poor choice of words, and what he really meant was that, for the foreseeable future, we are going to be looking back and making stories with all the Doctors we've had so far, rather than looking forwards to the future and making stories with a new incarnation. It was nevertheless a surprising thing to see in an official licensed piece of Doctor Who media in an official magazine, and they do kind of say, part of the interview, we'd like to reiterate that the BBC says, the official line is they remain committed to the series and it's not going anywhere, etc, etc. Obviously the truth of that, whether that kind of matches up with reality and what is being said, what isn't being said, is another matter, but you're not really going to get the licensed BBC official Doctor Who magazine sort of saying something to the contrary. For instance, all their behind-the-scenes coverage of the Reality War neatly and conveniently sidestepped the fact that there were reshoots for that story, for the finale, that the plan changed kind of months on from the original production period. And following this through a weird turn of events, we have actually kind of got the closest thing to an official response that we're going to get to these comments. It came about in a very strange way, frankly, because I think Rob Shearman's comments were basically, they were online, they were doing the rounds a little bit, but not too much. And then last week, Bad Wolf, the production company that's made the past couple of seasons of Doctor Who, and indeed the upcoming spin-off, The War Between the Land and Sea, they've been celebrating their 10th anniversary as a production company. It was founded back in 2015 by Jane Tranter and Julie Gardner, two of the executives on the current era of Doctor Who, but also two people who were instrumental in bringing it back in the first place in 2005. Jane was like a big figure in the BBC at the time. She was being interviewed by BBC Wales about this big anniversary for Bad Wolf, and whoever was doing the interview or researching the interview must have come across these comments from Rob Shearman in Doctor Who magazine, and they basically put them to Jane, who presumably hadn't heard them beforehand. It certainly kind of appears that way when you watch back or listen back to the clip. So she's there kind of off the cuff in the moment trying to come up with a response, and the first thing she says is, oh, that's actually a really rude thing to say, that the show is as dead as we've ever known it. I've seen fans giving her flack for saying that online, but I mean, that's of course what she is going to say as one of the executives on the current or most recent era of Doctor Who, especially because that era is technically still ongoing. It's still not actually ended yet. Yes, the 15th Doctor's era has ended, yes, the Doctor Who era has ended, but the spin-off, Thor Between the Land and the Sea, is still coming sometime next year. That was part of the initial order of episodes that were produced by Bad Wolf for the BBC and Disney+. So 26 episodes in total, the 3 60th anniversary specials, 2 seasons, 8 episodes long of Doctor Who, 2 Christmas specials, and then 5 episodes of The War Between the Land and the Sea. That is the spin they've put on it, that 21 episodes out of these 26 have aired so far. There are still 5 more to go, and that therefore means that the Disney era is still ongoing. The negotiations can't start or be formalised, at least, until all of those episodes have gone out. Whether or not this was always the case, or indeed whether it's the case full stop and it's not just spin, is another matter. But that's basically the gist of this, that the BBC officially, remains committed to Doctor Who, and similar comments have been made elsewhere by other executives, for instance at the Edinburgh TV Festival earlier in the year in August. I think the way this is blown up is kind of crazy, but also not surprising because of the current limbo with Doctor Who, because of the not knowing and, fans taking anything they can get and kind of clinging onto it. And of course, if journalists can make a story of it as well and kind of make it seem like this massive beef between a former Doctor Who writer and a current Doctor Who executive, then of course they're going to do that. But ultimately, does this change where we are with the show and the show's future? Well, no, I don't think it does. I don't think it kind of tells us anything that we didn't know already. Yes, there were problems with the Reality War in Doctor Who Season 2 and the whole Disney deal and everything. Clearly the plan changed somewhere along the line. That much is evident from the reshoots and the weird ending to the finale and everything that's been going on since then, with the limbo, with Billie Piper coming back, with the kind of the radio silence from the BBC, apart from these kind of nothing comments where they just say, oh yeah, we remain committed to Doctor Who, oh yeah, Doctor Who isn't going anywhere. And obviously, of course, in an ideal world, they would have been filming a 3rd season by this point, or indeed already filmed it and beyond, kind of planning the 4th season. There would have been more stuff happening if behind the scenes whatever went wrong hadn't gone wrong and, things had just gone as planned. And is it helpful for an interviewee in the official Doctor Who magazine to be making comments along the lines of, oh yeah, the show is as dead as it's ever been? Probably not, no, to be honest. This whole thing could have been avoided if those comments just hadn't been printed or said in the first place. But yes, that is this latest kerfuffle in a nutshell, and surely as long as Doctor Who discourse is alive and kicking, then the show itself is too. Do let me know all of your thoughts on this in the comments below. Please do also leave a like on the video if you have enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel if you're new. But otherwise, until the next one, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye for now.